Hello, everyone. It's good to be back. I'm Carla, the Cosmic Crone, and I'm here to speak with you about Wise Women Lead Through Pleasure. Now, it has been exactly a week since I came on live, and I never dreamed that I would take a week's hiatus. It wasn't the plan. But what I've been doing is in service to the land. We've been moving a lot of earth and a lot of horse shit, building gardens, doing ceremony, and listening to the land. And sometimes when I am so deeply physically engaged in real life and 3D world and the land like that, the online world just kind of hangs in the background, and I did share with you about our ceremony on Saturday, and some of you posted prayer requests, and those were spoken in the ceremony and placed on the fire. So thank you for participating with us. What a beautiful solstice, summer, the longest days here in North America. And for my clients in New Zealand and Australia, the shortest days. We're coming on and it's still dark early in the morning, your time. And I know what that's like. We have that in Maine. So right now we are enjoying high summer, and because I live in the Northeast, I'm just now getting gardens planted. The vegetables and the plants, I'm going out in a little while to battle the mosquitoes and get the tomatoes in the ground. At last, it's warm enough. So I am here today to get back into Wise Women Lead series because I learned a lot over this holiday, this sacred weekend of the solstice. I was reminded of pleasure, the pleasure of being in a body, the pleasure of sex, the pleasure of the beauty of summer nights and early dawns and the flowers and the bees and the hummingbirds and the baby birds and the baby turtles and the frogs and the sounds of the frogs, everything, earthworms, pleasure, the pleasure of food, the strength of a body that can move as much dirt as I've moved with my wheelbarrow this week. And I realize I am required by my mission to talk to you more about pleasure and to remember to center pleasure when we teach. When I teach, when I do healing work and work with clients. So we're talking about pleasure today. And some of you are finding me, and if you're here and you want to say hello, just say something in the comments so I can see you. It's always great to know that you're here and listening and participating. And the same if you come along later for the recording. So I think it's important to be succinct and brief because time is precious. So I'm just going to share one of my big reminders about pleasure was this book, Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Maree Brown. And it's extraordinary. It is reminding me of so much that I began working with 20 years ago when I first met my priestess and stepped into orgasmic alchemy and sexual healing and began my own healing journey that brought me here today to Cosmic Crone. And my calling, my purpose in life is to help human beings remember their intimate, embodied, pleasurable relationship with nature, which includes self and each other. And pleasure is how we tap into our power. It is how we feed ourselves. It is how we have the strength to go on every day. It is what we are designed for. We are designed for sensation. And that sensation, that sensuality, gives us so much information about the world around us. It tells us what is good to eat, what is good to live, what we need. Do we need to move closer to the fire or farther away? Do we need to rest? Do we need to sleep? Do we need to drink water? Do we need to bathe? Do we need to play? Do we need to dance? Do we need to touch one another? So pleasure teaches us how to be human and how to be alive. And our relationship with life is embodied. And there is a problem that we face as a culture that I believe is at the root of all of the problems. The social problems, the justice problems, the environmental problems, the interpersonal problems between groups of people, religions and governments and cultures and races, all of which are invented here. Because in bodies, we don't have those problems. In bodies, we meet each other, we check each other out, and we communicate. And we find our common ground, the ground that is being human on the planet. We are so much more alike than we are different. And we are the same species. And we can have sex with one another and interbreed. There is no such thing as race. And Adrienne Maree Brown is a woman of color. She's a Black woman. And she writes of pleasure activism centering the voices of Black women, scholars and adventurers and healers and artists and writers. And I haven't even gotten all the way through it. So there's a beautiful picture I will show you. There are many beautiful pictures, but this one will do. I'll just show you this one. This is about pleasure, about enjoying one another's bodies, whatever they look like, and our own body. You see, the key to enjoying another person's body is enjoying your own. It's sex and pleasure is never about the other person. It is about us and being present inside of us. And only when you're present with yourself and feeling free and liberated and free to enjoy, awake and alive and tuned in and turned on, only then can you make space and say, oh, here you are. Will you share this with me? Can I share this with you? I feel good. Can I help you feel good? Will you help me feel good? Can we collaborate in pleasure? And often that's considered sex. But it's not exclusively sex. We can have that kind of collaboration around conversation, around work, out on land, gardening, or flower arranging, or ceremony, or ritual, or food, or solving a problem, or playing a sport. We can enjoy. We collaborate sensually in every possible way. Pleasure is a problem for the greater society. Pleasure is considered frivolous, hedonistic, they know how to use it. You know, the carrot and the stick promise pleasure, fear punishment. So it's used. It's used to sell. It's used to motivate. It's used to reward. It's used to separate. It's used to condition us. You know, how much are we willing to work to have a little pleasure? How much are we willing to suffer to have a little pleasure, even if it's the cessation of suffering? How much do we confuse numbing with pleasure? Pleasure is awake, alive, and fully engaged. A lot of what passes for pleasure in modern society is actual numbing. distracting, numbing, denying, and a lot of what happens is happening from the here up. It's all in our heads. We are detached from our bodies. Our bodies, especially around pleasure and sexuality, our bodies have been traumatized. Pleasure can be incredibly confusing for people because of trauma, of rules, of being told it was bad, of being told we're not worthy, we don't fit, we don't match, we are too something. We're the wrong color, the wrong size, the wrong gender. We don't match what's expected, what's perfect, and our behavior. All behavior around pleasure, and especially around sex, is considered suspect. There are rules. And so we go underground. The rules around pleasure and sex create the porn industry, in my opinion. And that is a broad sweeping statement, but it's certainly relevant. And it's because it's incredibly available, but it's secret and it's shameful, it's private and it's alone. And it is anathema to intimacy and to connection, one human being to another. And that's where we tend to feel safe if we can disconnect our pleasure, our sexuality, our, quote, shameful needs and urges from being human and showing up in the world. We hide this most essential part of ourselves, and we either deny it's there, we sublimate it, we eat or drink or do drugs or do porn or do anything, exercise, TV watch. We go for this kind of, what is it? It's this, we dig neural grooves. We dig grooves in our neurology that create itches and hungers. And we find a way to fill those grooves that is easy and unchallenging and readily available and doesn't require us to face our wounds, our anger, our genuine emotions, or expose ourselves to other people's emotions and opinions and rejection. So the great healing that is required on our planet, as alongside, I think what I want you to get from this conversation today is that the healing on the planet, healing war and creating peace, healing ill health and creating health, healing scarcity and creating abundance, healing discord and abuse and race. Hi, Karen. It's good to see you. Thanks for showing up. Healing conflict, healing prejudice, healing racism, healing repression and oppression of all kinds, healing abuse of the climate, the abuse of children, inhumanity, healing all of that requires pleasure. Pleasure is the underpinning. It is the thing that runs through all of it. In other words, replace all of that pain and suffering and struggle and abuse with pleasure. Pleasure that is autonomous, that has a standing in our true self, owning our power, owning our identity, feeling so confident in self, so whole, that our only possible response to other people is love and appreciation and brotherhood. And our response, our relationship to the world is one of intimacy, love, appreciation, and care. Pleasure is what will feed that. I'm just going to use this as a wild example. If you're on the planet, you probably are aware that there is a whole class of people who are climate change deniers. And one reason they give, some of them give, is that it will hurt. It will hurt to put in practice changes to our energy usage, changes to the way we do transportation and food. It will hurt to change our economy, where the jobs are, and to learn new skills, to do different kinds of jobs, and to completely destroy or dismantle some industries because they're polluters and poisoners, and they're built on fossil fuels, etc. I mean, it just goes on. It will hurt. The bottom line, and the way they get support, is that it will hurt. It will hurt you. It will hurt me. It will hurt them. It will hurt profits. It's going to hurt somebody. Well, that's anathema. That is the opposite of pleasure, isn't it? And every climate person, sometimes we can get trapped in, and try to argue that it won't hurt. Or, so what if it hurts? It has to hurt because the death of the planet will hurt even more. We can get caught up in that hurt cycle. And the only hope we have of shifting the argument, of shifting the conversation, not even an argument, is to say, if we do solar and wind and change the way that we live and shift, turn every required shift and change into a point of pleasure. It will feel good. It will employ more people. It's of the future. It goes into the future. It lasts longer. The pleasure is not just for today and this paycheck. You and your children will still be alive and working in these industries later because human beings will grow with the changes. So anyway, and look at the earth. Instead of something that we rape, pillage, and poison, she gives us pleasure. Nature gives us pleasure, not merely air, water, and food, and a place to live, but pleasure. The fragrance of flowers, the taste of food, trees, air, sunset, light. We evolved to live in that pleasure. So we're going to talk a lot more about pleasure. The importance of wise women leadership is to bring pleasure forward, to own pleasure in your own life. And that includes, it starts with sexuality, because the shame and the association of pleasure with sex almost exclusively, and pleasure with guilt. How many guilty pleasures? Oh, look at that chocolate cake. Look at this glass of wine. Look at me taking the afternoon off. Guilty pleasures. I feel guilty for having pleasure. We may laugh. We may not think we mean it. Words don't lie. It's what we believe. And we will have to pay. We will have to pay for those guilty pleasures. We will have to work harder. We will get fat. We will feel like shit. We will beat ourselves up. We will judge ourselves and judge other people based on how we're judging ourselves. So you see how it perpetuates. So we are going to take the guilt out of pleasure. We are going to tap into pleasure, erotic and other kinds of ways, and how we're going to explore together, because this is my learning edge too, how to lead with pleasure, how to work with other people in a way that invokes pleasure and creates a spirit and an environment of pleasure. So that's what I have for today. And I'm going to give you this book again. I highly recommend everybody read it. This is a book for, oops, this is a book for life. I think I'll be a year getting through this, and then I'll be turning around and starting over again. I love books like that. So that is Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Maree Brown, who reminded me of the work, how I stepped into my healing and ritual and spiritual path. It was literally through pleasure, orgasmic alchemy. The urge to compliment with self-forgiveness is also a key to obtain pleasure. Yes. Say more about that. What do we have to forgive ourselves for? I mean, and that I know sometimes we do. We have to forgive ourselves for things, mistakes, for ignorance, for not knowing, for blundering through life. And I would also challenge that sometimes we forgive ourselves. I think the only thing we really have to forgive ourselves, we can forgive ourselves for mistakes that hurt other people, especially if it was intentional, because sometimes we do intend to lash out and hurt. Sometimes it bypasses the brain. It rises from another place in us. But the people we hurt the most are self. We will beat ourselves up, sometimes to stifle the sense that I am going to say something terrible, and so I must turn it inward to keep from being evil, awkward, bad, outward. So I think the number one thing to forgive ourselves for is how we judge ourselves and how we talk to ourselves. Start where you are. Every day is a new day. We are given that gift for as long as we're breathing. And so we can start with a new day. To wake up is pleasure. And if it's not, examine that. Look, what's going on here? What hurts, inside or out? Yeah, forgiveness for self-judgment. That's right. Okay, I'm going to go dig in my garden for a while. More planting to do, and I will be back sometime tomorrow with more on Wise Women Lead and pleasure and whatever else Spirit lays upon me to talk with you about. Have a wonderful evening.